Hey, history buffs and curious minds, welcome back to At Enchant Minds, where the past meets the peculiar. History is often taught as this parade of dates and battles, but let's be real. It's also a giant catalog of the weird, wild, and downright unbelievable. Let's dive into one of the most puzzling historical events that will leave you scratching your head. Get ready for a journey into the unknown. First up, we have the Great Emu War of 1932 in Australia. Now, when you think of Australia, you probably think of kangaroos, koalas, maybe even the occasional venomous spider. But in 1932, the real terror down under wasn't some creepy crawly, it was the emu. Yes, the emu. That long-legged flightless bird that looks like it should be auditioning for a Big Bird biopic. Turns out these feathered fellas were causing quite a ruckus. Imagine this, Australia's military, armed with Lewis machine guns versus a horde of emus. See, after World War I, a bunch of former soldiers turned to farming in Western Australia. Problem was, the emus liked to eat the crops. And when I say liked, I mean loved. They were like the locusts of the bird world, only much, much larger. The farmers complained to the government, and, in a move that would make even the most trigger-happy general blush, the government declared war on the emus. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Well, a lot, it turns out. The emus, you see, were masters of guerrilla warfare. They were surprisingly agile and resilient, dodging bullets and generally making the soldiers look like they were trying to swat flies in a hurricane. The military tried everything. They set up ambushes, they chased the emus in trucks. They even tried mounting a machine gun on a truck for a mobile attack unit. But the emus, bless their feathery little hearts, were unfazed. They just kept munching away on those crops, dodging bullets like feathered Neos in the Matrix. The whole thing became a media sensation, with newspapers having a field day reporting on the Army's struggles against their avian adversaries. Headlines like, "Emu warbirds still in possession of the battlefield" didn't exactly inspire confidence in the military's fighting prowess. In the end, the Australian government called off the war, having wasted a lot of ammunition and achieved, well, nothing. The emus had won. So, next time you see an emu, just remember they're not to be trifled with. Next, let's cha-cha back to 1518 Strasbourg, where the dancing plague struck. Now I know what you're thinking. A plague that makes you dance? Sounds like my kind of party. But trust me, this wasn't your average Saturday night fever. Picture this. It's a sweltering July day in Strasbourg, and a woman named Frau Trophea steps out into the street and starts dancing. And I don't mean a little jig or a waltz. I'm talking full-on, uncontrollable, arms flailing, feet-stomping dancing. Now, Strasbourg in the 16th century wasn't exactly known for spontaneous public dance-offs. But as Frau Trophea continued to boogie, something strange happened. People started joining in, and I don't mean a few curious onlookers. Within days, dozens of people were dancing alongside her, seemingly unable to stop. And this wasn't just some quirky flash mob. People were dancing themselves to exhaustion, collapsing from dehydration and exhaustion. Imagine dancing for days on end with no breaks, no food, no water. Doctors were baffled. Was it mass hysteria? A bizarre form of epilepsy? Some historians theorized it was ergot poisoning caused by a fungus that can grow on rye bread and cause hallucinations and convulsions. But even that didn't quite explain the sheer scale and duration of the dancing frenzy. The city officials, desperate to stop the madness, tried everything. They brought in musicians to try and guide the dancing into some kind of order. They even built a wooden stage and hired professional dancers, hoping that mimicking the afflicted would somehow break the spell. But the dancing plague, like a macabre conga line, just kept going. At its peak, hundreds of people were caught in its grip, their bodies seemingly possessed by an invisible DJ. The dancing didn't stop until September, weeks after it began, leaving behind a trail of exhaustion, injury, and even death. To this day, the dancing plague of 1518 remains one of history's most baffling medical mysteries. It's a stark reminder that sometimes the human body can be as big a mystery as the universe itself. Alright, crash course history buffs, buckle up, because today we're diving headfirst into a disaster that's equal parts bizarre and tragic. The Great Molasses Flood of 1919. Yeah, you heard that right, molasses. We're not talking about some spilled tea in Boston Harbor. Oh no, this is industrial-sized stickiness on an epic scale. Picture this. It's a crisp January day in Boston's North End. People are going about their business. Kids are playing stickball, totally unaware that a 50-foot-tall tank containing 2.5 million gallons of molasses is about to unleash sugary chaos upon them. This was a tsunami of molasses, surging through the streets at 35 miles per hour, knocking down buildings, engulfing people and horses. The aftermath of the Great Molasses Flood was, to put it mildly, a sticky situation. And then there was the legal battle. Others blamed shoddy construction and poor maintenance. The Great Molasses Flood serves as a stark reminder that even the sweetest things can have a dark side. Okay, history fans, let's talk real estate. Specifically, let's talk about one of the most lopsided deals in the history of real estate, the sale of Manhattan. Yes, you heard that right, the entire island of Manhattan, sold for a song. The year is 1626. Peter Minuit, a Dutch colonial official, sails into what is now New York Harbor and strikes a deal with the local Lenape people for the island of Manhattan. The price, a mere 60 guilders worth of trade goods. That's about $24 in today's money. Now, I know what you're thinking, $24 for Manhattan? That's less than a tank of gas. And you'd be right. It's a deal that would make even the savviest real estate mogul drool with envy. But here's the thing. Back then, Manhattan wasn't exactly the bustling metropolis it is today. It was a wild, untamed island inhabited by the Lenape people who used it for hunting, fishing, and farming. To them, it was a valuable resource, but not necessarily something they saw as a future global financial center. Of course, hindsight is 20/20. Today, Manhattan is home to Wall Street, Times Square, and some of the most expensive real estate on the planet. That $24 investment would be worth trillions today. But the story of the sale of Manhattan is more than just a tale of a sweet deal. It's a story about colonialism, about the clash of cultures, and about the often unequal power dynamics that have shaped our world. The Lenape people, like many indigenous groups throughout history, were ultimately displaced from their land. The Dutch, and later the English, established their dominance, and Manhattan transformed into the city we know today. So, the next time you're strolling through Central Park or gazing up at the skyscrapers of Midtown, remember the story of the sale of Manhattan. It's a reminder that history is full of complexities, and that even the most seemingly straightforward transactions can have far-reaching consequences. Alright, mystery lovers, get ready for a historical head-scratcher that'll leave you reaching for your tinfoil hats. The Tunguska Event. An explosion in the Siberian wilderness flattened trees over an area the size of London. June 30th, 1908. A blinding light flashes across the sky, followed by a deafening roar. The ground trembles, windows shatter, and a massive shockwave circles the globe. Witnesses described a fiery object streaking across the sky. But there was no crater, just millions of trees flattened, radiating outward from a central point. So, what exactly happened in Tunguska? The leading theory is a large meteoroid or comet exploded in the atmosphere. Other theories range from a natural gas explosion to a secret government weapons test, and of course the alien spaceship theory. The Tunguska Event remains one of the most perplexing mysteries of the 20th century. Okay, history buffs, let's talk vermin. Specifically, London in the 1780s, a city absolutely overrun by rats. And I'm not talking a couple of cute sewer-dwelling dudes named Remy, I'm talking hordes of disease-ridden rodents outnumbering humans, striking fear into the hearts of even the bravest milkmaids. It was a public health nightmare, a smelly, gnawing crisis. The Thames was basically a rat superhighway, and no amount of cheese-laden traps seemed to put a dent in the population. Enter the cats. But not just any cats, oh no. These were the streetwise alley cat descendants of generations of mousers, hardened by London grime and ready to rumble. Now, we don't have detailed battle plans or anything, but legend has it a particularly charismatic Ginger Tabby, let's call him General Ginger, rallied his fellow felines. They weren't just chasing scraps anymore, they were an organized force, strategically deployed to protect their turf, which conveniently was also everyone else's turf. Details are, as always with historical anecdotes, a little fuzzy. Did they divide London into territories? Were there midnight strategy sessions in alleyways all hisses and purrs? We may never know. But what we do know is that the cats of London, united under their whiskered general, waged war on the rat population. And it wasn't just a free-for-all, claw-to-claw combat. These cats, they were cunning. They'd lay siege to bakeries, knowing that's where the tastiest, plumpest rats would congregate. They'd stalk the docks, cutting off the rat supply lines. It was a war of attrition, fought one whisker twitch, one pounce, one well-placed bite at a time. Now, were there casualties on both sides? Almost certainly, but the ultimate victors, according to the stories passed down, were the cats. The rat population dwindled, the streets were a little less smelly, and Londoners, perhaps begrudgingly, owed a debt of gratitude to their feline overlords. The Battle of the Cats might be a footnote in history, but it's a reminder that even the smallest creatures, when organized and motivated, can achieve extraordinary things. Alright folks, buckle up because we're about to delve into one of the most baffling and frankly terrifying mysteries: spontaneous human combustion. People just bursting into flames, no external source, just poof, engulfed. It sounds like something out of a horror movie, right? And for centuries, that's pretty much how it was treated. Whispered stories, campfire tales, the kind of thing that made you sleep with a bucket of water next to the bed. But there are enough documented cases, enough eyewitness accounts to make you wonder, what if there's something more to it? Now, science, being science, has tried to explain it. The prevailing theory is the wick effect. Basically, the human body becomes a candle, clothing acting as the wick, body fat as the fuel. A small spark, maybe static electricity, ignites the clothes and boom, you've got a very unfortunate human torch situation. The wick effect is plausible, sure, but it doesn't explain everything. For starters, the intensity of the fire. Spontaneous combustion cases often describe the body being almost completely incinerated, bones turned to ash, while the surrounding furniture is barely singed. That's one heck of a hot fire, hotter than most house fires. Then there's the speed. Some accounts describe the victim bursting into flames in an instant, no time for a slow burn. And the smell, often described as a sickly sweet, almost chemical odor distinct from a regular fire. These details, they don't quite fit with the neat and tidy wick theory. So, where does that leave us? Honestly, still scratching our heads. While most scientists remain skeptical, attributing cases to misidentified causes or embellished stories, there's a sliver of doubt, a flicker of the unknown that keeps the mystery of spontaneous human combustion alive. Maybe it's a rare confluence of factors we haven't discovered yet. Maybe it's something entirely different, something beyond our current understanding. Whatever the explanation, it's a reminder that the universe still holds plenty of secrets, some of them a little too close to home for comfort. Okay, let's talk about the weather specifically, the kind of weather that makes you say, nope, I'm staying inside forever. We're talking raining frogs, folks. Not a light sprinkle of tadpoles, but a full-on amphibian downpour. And before you say it, yes, this is a real thing. It's been documented throughout history, from ancient texts to modern-day news reports. In 1807, Kentucky experienced a particularly impressive froggy deluge. Imagine you're strolling along enjoying a lovely summer day when suddenly the sky opens up and instead of raindrops, it's frogs. Now, before you picture giant storm cloud-sized frogs scooping up their smaller brethren and playing amphibian airlift, there's a slightly more scientific explanation. Most likely, it's a combination of strong winds, waterspouts, or tornadoes. These weather events can lift water and anything in it, including unsuspecting frogs, high into the air. Think of it like nature's blender, whipping up a cocktail of wind and water with a dash of amphibian for good measure. This swirling vortex of meteorological mayhem can then transport its froggy cargo for miles before depositing it, shall we say, rather unceremoniously, on some unsuspecting town. It's not just frogs either. Fish, snakes, even spiders have been known to take an unexpected aerial journey courtesy of Mother Nature. There's even a term for it. Animal rain. Catchy, right? But while it might seem like a scene from a wacky disaster movie, it's a reminder of the sheer power and unpredictability of the natural world. So, next time you see a dark cloud on the horizon, don't just grab your umbrella. You might want to pack a net, just in case. Because when it rains, it might just pour ... FROGS. And honestly, isn't that a metaphor for life? Just when you think you've seen it all, the universe throws a frog-shaped curveball your way. Alright, cheeseheads, gather round, because we're about to dive into a tale of dairy-driven defiance. It's 1966, the Cold War is simmering, and the Beatles are about to release Revolver. But in Switzerland, a different kind of revolution is brewing, a revolution of the cheese variety. See, the Swiss government, in their infinite wisdom, decided to impose some regulations on cheesemaking. They wanted to standardize production, maybe streamline things a bit. But the Swiss cheesemakers, fiercely independent and proud of their craft, weren't having it. For them, cheesemaking wasn't just a job, it was an art form passed down through generations, a source of national pride. Imagine their outrage, the government trying to tell them how to make their Emmental, their Gruyere. It was an affront to their very being. So, what did these cheese-wielding warriors do? They revolted, of course. The Great Cheese Uprising had begun. And this wasn't just a few disgruntled cheesemakers grumbling over their curds. This was a full-blown, cheese-fueled protest. They took to the streets, these guardians of Gouda, armed with their cheese-making tools, their voices raised in protest. Now you might be thinking, a cheese riot? Sounds a little cheesy, doesn't it? But this was serious business. The Swiss take their cheese very, very seriously. It's an integral part of their culture, their economy, their very identity. The cheesemakers argued that the government regulations would stifle their creativity, homogenize their beloved cheese, and ultimately harm the industry they dedicated their lives to. They feared the loss of traditional methods, the unique flavors that made Swiss cheese, well, Swiss cheese. And let's be real, nobody wants to live in a world where cheese is bland and boring, right? The protesters, with their cheese-themed signs and chants of "no cheese, no peace," captured the attention of the nation. The media loved it. Newspapers ran headlines like "Cheesemakers declare war on regulations" and "Kurds of contention divide nation." The story even spread internationally because, let's face it, everyone loves a good underdog story, especially when it involves cheese. Okay folks, buckle up because we're about to enter the thrilling and slightly fishy world of international diplomacy. In the icy waters of the North Atlantic, a different kind of drama is unfolding: the Cod Wars. Now, before you imagine epic naval battles with cannons blazing and codfish flying through the air, let me clarify. The Cod Wars were less about actual warfare and more about, well, fishing rights. On one side we have Canada, proud nation of maple syrup, hockey, and a deep love for cod. On the other side, Iceland, land of volcanoes, Bjork, and a fierce determination to protect their cod stocks. Both countries claimed rights to the same rich fishing grounds teeming with cod. A fight primarily fought with strongly worded diplomatic letters and tense encounters between fishing vessels. The Cod Wars, despite their comical name, were a reminder that resources are finite and access to them can be a source of conflict. And there you have it. 10 more bizarre and hilarious historical events that prove, once again, that reality is often stranger than fiction. From cheese-wielding protesters to cod-obsessed nations, we've journeyed through history's oddities, uncovering the weird, the wacky, and the downright unbelievable. We've learned that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are armed with cheese graters, and the fiercest battles are fought over fish. History, my friends, is anything but boring. If you enjoyed this trip through history's oddities, don't forget to subscribe, hit that thumbs up, and leave a comment with your favorite weird historical fact. Who knows, maybe we'll feature it in a future video. Thanks for watching, and remember to keep exploring the strange and unusual. See you next time.